Hello everybody. How you doing? I hope you're well wherever you are in the world. It's become that much more important to me to actually give you these well wishes because, a family member, not immediate family member, but slightly extended family member, elderly, technically a little bit vulnerable. Yeah, now has COVID, and we're just having to keep an eye on things and. It's a worry, isn't it? It is a worry. It'll be nice when we don't have to worry about these sort of things, but that's just the way life is at the moment. And there's not a lot we can do about that. That's just the way it is. Yeah. So, what have I got to tell you about? We've got an interesting book that we're currently reading. I've got the feeling that we're going to be seeing a little bit more of English history. What do you think? We did a little bit of that in one of the, sorry, I'm just getting my pockets so they're not irritating me because they're all bunched up. Ugh, it's like, yeah. One of the Samoyed books, the last one, had time travel in it. I've got a feeling that since we're in an old building, it's a castle as well as being a house. The two are sort of interconnected, kind of like this picture behind me. There's ruins of a castle there and there. There's actually more at the location that this is, but this is as far as I understand, a livable house that is part of, attached to this wall here. There's a chimney that looks like it's actually a full working order chimney for a fireplace. And I did actually know where it is, and I now can't remember. I will be able to, Scotney Castle Gardens. Let's have a look at what Scotney Castle Gardens are. So the reason why I put that picture up there is because of the fact that it's a similar sort of a setup to what the children have in our current story, which is the House of Arden. And it's about this young boy and his sister who's 2 years older than him. So I think he's 9 and she's 11, something similar to that. And he has just become the Lord of Arden because his elderly uncle or great uncle or somebody who was had been the previous Lord of Arden had died of old age, I think. And it's just one of those things that happens. Yeah. Anyway, and so in the story, this child has inherited this property, and there is a prophecy to go with it, and it's something to do with, no, not so much prophecy. Yeah, kind of. That's how they were first introduced to the concept. So I might as well say prophecy. In the story, there is a special saying they have to say in a proper place to be able to get something that will assist them in finding the lost treasure of this family. Very much a fantasy story theme, I think. So I'm going to zoom out and find out whereabouts this is. Okay. How do I explain this? If you're looking at a map of England, I suppose a better way to do it would be to actually activate my maps on here. I had a map thing here at one stage. I probably got rid of it. Is it this one? Yes, it is that one. Technology. It sometimes works. Interact, that's me. I will put this over here. This is like what we do with the jigsaw puzzles, which I have in mind something for the jigsaw puzzle today, but I haven't actually got it ready for you. I was in the middle of doing that when I realized I need to actually get the starting soon screen up so that if you come early you get the ads out of the way. Scotney Castle, right, we shall leave that marker there. And we shall zoom out until you can see roughly whereabouts in England the picture I'm using as my current background is. It may well be that the author, there you go, there's the bottom, there's the bottom half of England. So you've got Cornwall and Devon over here. Yes, that's the edge of my green screen. One bit's shadowing the other and all that sort of stuff, so it's not doing its proper thing. I'll get that out of the way. Right. And then you've got London up here and Scotney Castle here, and then this is the south coast along here, and this is the English Channel where my arm is, and France is below my arm. Yeah, I'm not very good at pretending I'm a weather person. So if we come in closer, we will see that down here is Brighton. I don't know if you know anything about Brighton. The Brighton Pavilion is an odd-looking building, which was a favourite of one of the royal family a few generations back. It was kind of like an oriental house thing which had onion-shaped domes and all sorts of things like this. Over here is Eastbourne, and then we have Hastings. That one there is Hastings, the one that's on the tip of my finger. And then, Romney Marsh is this area in here, because that's New Romney. So this is Romney Marshes, this area in here. It's flat land and behind this headland here. Anyway, so Scotney Castle's here, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if the author had been there and seen the setting of the old ruined buildings with the house attached to it, part of it, but still being a house, that sort of thing, and decided that this was a really neat story idea. What can I do with it? How can I turn this into a children's story? Just because that's kind of the way she thought a lot when you actually look at the way she does things. So I'm just zooming in closer, and I shall turn it onto this. It's not very clear really. There's a forestry area here. There's a forest here, and then there's a castle there. We're not gaining anything really by it. It's in this property here, Scotney Castle. That's part of what you see, but the bit that we are seeing has a garden with ruins, doesn't it? So let's see what we can find. It's got to be somewhere on this property. Ah, I found it. The old castle, not the more modern house. Here, in a moated, it was a moated castle, because you've got a water source here, and then you've got this loop of water that comes right around here, and that looks like the base of a tower. This looks like the base of a tower, and that also looks like the house roof that we were looking at before. So we zoom in. Yeah, I think that could well be it, looking across at parts of this. What do you think? And then there's, that's obviously a bridge now, but once it would have been a drawbridge. So yeah, there's part of castle walls or building walls in the castle, and there's possibly the roof that we were looking at in the background that I have behind me. Right, I shall turn that off for now, just so I don't get too distracted by it, because I do like interesting pictures. And get that one out of the way. Right. Where do we get up to on our story pictures? Let's go back here. Okay, the children had arrived, and they think that this lady here thinks they are her grandchildren. And there was this gentleman here. So she's set them to work to learn something, some poetry or whatever. We haven't got to this part of the story yet, but that's okay. We will get to it and find out what that's about. So for now, I'm going to turn that one off, and I'll get to it when we get to it. That's just the way life is, isn't it? Right. Just making sure that I haven't got anybody telling me that there is something I'm meant to be doing because I've forgotten it. Not so far, that's good. Now, if you are wanting to say hello to me or remind me that there's something that I've forgotten to do and I haven't yet remembered to turn the chat on so that you can't tell me while I'm actually streaming, you can join my Discord server. I will give you the link for that. And if you follow that link, agree to the terms, which is basically be nice to everybody, that sort of stuff, be kind, considerate, don't be rude. Accept the conditions, join the Discord server. You can actually write in the general chatter channel of my Discord server in case I've forgotten to turn something on or whatever. I try to keep a little bit of an eye on it when I'm actually streaming. I don't have any promises that I will manage to successfully keep my eye on it when I'm streaming, but I'll see how I go. Good to have everybody here, loving it. I guess I better... No, I'll do the jigsaw puzzle just before I start to read. But first of all, I'm going to introduce myself to everybody who's new, which isn't necessarily everybody who's watching at the moment, because some people are new because they come along and they watch the video afterwards and then they go, oh, this is interesting. I might watch this again, this sort of thing again. I want to know what happens next in the story. And so then they turn up when I'm live. So this is just my way of giving them a bit of background. So hi, I'm Jev. I read old children's books, such as, yes, I'm going to fiddle with my green screen behind me because I forgot to get this out. I've got so many things I have to do, such as this one, which is the book we've just finished before the current book that we're on. As you can see, this is not in very good nick. That spine is falling apart. This book was produced in the early 20th century. The pages are rather thick and clunky in some ways, but also, not that one, that one's doing well. Some of the pages actually come out. They've been stuck in again with sellotape, which, as some of you know, sellotape, the adhesive goes brittle and lets go, or it goes gummy and it sticks pages together, which it shouldn't do. There's one of the illustrations. I still have the illustration. It's in the right part of the book, but it's another one that's been stuck in with sellotape, because sellotape was once considered a wonderfully, almost magical invention for fixing things. I think I remember wishing that we had sellotape when I was a child, just because it wasn't something that was in our budget. More commonly, I read books that don't usually go green screen and show you the background like that. This is a copy of The Secret Garden, which I can't really show you particularly well without turning off my green screen, but this one is in better condition. So I'll put that one out of the way, and I think this one will show you better. So physical books that I read tend to be this sort of thing, and other ones like the ones I was just showing you. This particular one is quite old. It was given to my grandmother's brother. So that means my children's great-grandmother's brother in July 1897. 97, 98, 99, 1900, 1901, 1902, 22, 125 years old. Still got it, still fully readable. The battery hasn't gone flat. But the intriguing thing about it is it was printed back in the days when you put ink on a printing plate and then put paper over it, and then you squeezed them together and the ink transferred from the printing plate onto the page. They were squeezed so hard that even now you can actually feel the texture of where the letters were pressed into the page if you run your fingers over the page. If it was in a museum, you wouldn't be able to touch it with bare hands. You would actually have to wear gloves. Because the acid in the oil on your skin actually causes paper eventually to break down. But also, if you look at an old book, often the pages will actually have brown spotting on them, and that's usually acid starting to destroy it, if it's not from food being dropped on it. Okay, so these are the style of illustrations that they often used to have in older books, where you've got these odd clothing styles going on. This would be late Victorian. The style of the dress that the girl's wearing and the style of the sailor suit that the boy is wearing was continued into the Edwardian era, which covers into the very beginning of the 20th century. But the actual image is made by scratching a metal plate or a wooden plate or a stone plate being big flat area, to make the image, and then rubbing ink across it, taking the extra ink off that you don't need, the stuff that's too much for just the lines, putting your piece of paper on it and squeezing them together really, 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 really hard so that the paper, when you peel it off very carefully, holds on to the ink. And that's how illustrations used to be put into books. Which is why an illustrated book used to cost a lot more than a standard printed book. because often they would have to be inked up by hand instead of by machine, just because there was a little bit of extra focus on detail that needed to be done. Right, so I read old children's books. That's kind of part of who I am. I've always read old children's books. And the books that I have read when I was growing up were the books that, apart from the ones from the school library and ones that were given to me as gifts that were brand new, which was always wonderful. But apart from that, the other books that I read when I was growing up were books that my parents and my grandparents had been given. And they were physically still the same books that they had been given. So I grew up reading old books and learnt a lot about the world, other countries, other time periods, the way people used to live, because even when a book is written as a fantasy, it still is written with language that's used in the way that was usually, even now, is contemporary with when it was written. Not the slang and all that sort of stuff, but just there's an underlying way we see the world, which is actually reflected through the way we write, even if we don't write something that is set within our own time period. So it was a great way to actually be aware of the broader world that was current and had also previously been, location and time-wise. And then since then, I've lived in a lot of different places, including overseas for a number of years and all sorts of stuff like that. Wonderful. Lots of fabulous experiences. And it's a lot of that sort of stuff that I really want to be able to just ongoing be able to share with people so that they can, I don't know, make the most of the opportunities that they have, I suppose. And enjoy some other stuff, enjoy a different part of the world, all that sort of thing. Get to understand how other people think and talk. Growing up in New Zealand, we had television programs from New Zealand made ones, Australian ones, because they have a much bigger population than us, and so therefore they have a bigger budget for making their own television programs. So we had New Zealand programs, Australian programs, we had English programs, because, I mean, we still had very strong ties with England at that stage, being part of the Commonwealth. We had Canadian programs because they were also part of the Commonwealth, and sort of there was a kinship between the countries. And we also had American programs. Those were the main ones that we had. And so you grew up listening to all of these different accents that people spoke with, not put on accents, but accents from where they lived. And it meant that your ears got tuned into being able to understand broader than just the way you speak yourself. And I'm a great believer in continuing to listen to people who speak with a different accent to ourselves and becoming familiar with it, so familiar that we don't even think about what they're saying, we just understand it. The more you listen to somebody who speaks with a different accent to you, the better your brain gets at interpreting what they've said, so you don't even have to think about it. I was watching a YouTube video recently done by a chap who is Scottish, and he's got a very, very strong Glaswegian Scottish accent. So he's from Glasgow. I'm pretty sure it's Glasgow. If not actually Glasgow, it's fairly close into Glasgow, that part of Scotland, not the posh part, but more the ordinary people, factories, working class, that sort of thing. Glasgow's very proud of that sort of background that they have. Anyway, so he's from there. And most people have to watch his videos with the subtitles turned on because they can't understand what he's saying. Now, I was watching the first one, and I usually have the subtitles turned on, but something else I'd been watching, it was poorly subtitled, so I'd turn them off. And I was just listening and watching and didn't have any problem with what he was saying, and it all made sense and all this sort of stuff. And I get to the end of the video and I go, hang on a minute, I didn't have subtitles on. Why is he saying that some people have to have subtitles on to understand? And then I realised it's because when I was going to school and when I first left home and was going to church, both my chemistry teacher and also the minister at the church I went to were from Edinburgh and spoke with a Scottish accent. One of them had been in New Zealand for a long time, but if you know anything about the Scots, they have a tendency to actually, without intending to, it's just part of the way their brain functions, they still speak with a strong Scottish accent. And even though he comes from a different region of Scotland, there was enough similarity that I had no trouble whatsoever understanding what he was saying, because my brain was already tuned into the sounds and how they relate to words that I'm familiar with, and also some things he was talking about which aren't common in New Zealand, aren't common in our language usage, but they were terms that I was familiar with because of both of these other two Scottish gentlemen that I knew when I was growing up. Anyway, so broadening our understanding of the world, broadening the way we think, our ability to think, it's good for your mind. It keeps it supple and active, like your muscles. The more you use it, the better it gets, the stronger it gets, the healthier within reason it gets. Like if you push your body too hard physically and don't give it enough time to rest and recover, then yes, you will have injury. Yes, you will get exhausted. Yes, you will have to stop by force, not by choice. And the same does go with your brain. If you push yourself too hard for too long, you get burnout. But general principle, stay learning. Find things to be interested in and find out more about them. We live in a wonderful time for that in this day and age with our ready access to the internet for most of us, which is how you're actually managing to see me at the moment and listen. It means that we have great opportunities to keep learning, listening, finding out about things, spurring our brains on to learn about so much more, broadening our horizons, and also gaining greater understanding of other people around us. Anyway, that was all by way of introduction. So I do have 3 tips. I give these 3 tips almost every time I actually read. Sometimes I forget, and sometimes my chat very kindly reminds me of my 3 tips. First tip, water. Actually, no, first tip is drink. Make sure you have something to drink handy. So I've always got water handy. I have my water bottle here that I can shake at you. I don't usually actually drink from this one these days because it tips over too easily because it's tall and thin. I like the colour. So tip number 1, something to drink. I've also got some yummy iced coffee. I did the groceries this morning, so that was my treat. So tip number 1, something to drink. Tip number 2, something to snack on. And what do we have today? Oh, I'm going to make lots of noise here and rattle around and make a mess. Yes, I'm tearing open a paper bag. And what is she tearing open the paper bag for, you ask? What is she going to show us? The suspense is killing me. Not quite, but still. Anyway. Do I like being dramatic? No, never. Me? Dramatic? So the snack for today for me is a cream donut. Yes, this is a donut in New Zealand. It is long, it is split in half, and it is filled with whipped cream. No, not a replica amulet. Sorry. Not for a snack, but kind of that sort of shape, except without a hole on the top. Cream donuts. This is the way we make donuts in New Zealand traditionally. They're long, and then they're split down the middle, filled with whipped cream, a dab of jam, and sometimes, if you want to make them fancy, a drizzle of chocolate. You can actually get the round ones. We even also have chain stores, like donut chain stores like Krispy Kreme and Dunkin' Donuts now. But where I live, we don't have anything like that because we're away from where the big populations are, where those sort of shops like to be. Now my fingers are sticky. Hang on. Excuse me. Yummy. Anyway, so tip number 1, something to drink. Tip number 2, something to snack on. Tip number 3 is somewhere comfortable to sit. And this is my prop for it. Lovely comfy cushion, well stuffed so you can lean on it without feeling the floor underneath or whatever. It's beautifully flocked with a lovely floral swirly pattern on it, which is a bit hard for me to get the light right for usually. There you go. Anyone would think I like purple. I actually think I like blue, but I also like purple. So Q says, I've been craving a donut, honestly. On the list once I'm past COVID and can enjoy flavours. Absolutely. Keep writing your list. so you don't go, oh no, that's right, that was something I was going to have about 3 weeks after you can actually start tasting things again. That would be so disappointing if you forgot something that you really wanted to eat just because of getting back into the normal swing of things. I was going to say my dad hasn't been affected by that side of COVID, but I can still say it. He doesn't have a sense of smell. He's never had a sense of smell. It's nothing to do with COVID, so that affects also his sense of taste. I mean, he can taste salty, sweet, all that sort of stuff, but yeah, he's never had a sense of smell, so he's not missing that sort of side of it, and we can't use that as a diagnostic progress indicator for him either, unfortunately. I do hope you're getting lots of rest and drinking lots and lots of water to help flush all the dead bugs, systems, toxins, whatever they're called, out of your system, because yes, your body does produce a whole lot of stuff that it's got to get rid of when it's fighting germs. That includes viruses, not just bacteria. Water does help with that, but make sure you're also getting plenty of other stuff. I know that it's very common to lose your appetite when you crook with something like COVID, especially if it's given you a temperature or a sore throat and it's taken away your sense of taste and smell. Not fun at all. Look after yourself. So yeah, all of that sort of stuff. I'm just going to do a little bit of computer housekeeping while you are here, and if you are a streamer, this is very important to do. If you can't do it, you need to make sure you have, because you're really, really busy with your stream, you need to make sure you have moderators who can do it. What I am doing is checking to see if there is somebody in my chat, well, on my channel at the moment, that is not actually a person, but is a bot. Not a chat bot, not one of the proper authorized chat bots like Stream Elements and SiriBot and Commander Root and those ones. Those are safe. Those are okay. They have been approved by Twitch. They will actually not be affected by any of the things I'm now going to tell you. So if you are a streamer, you need to keep an eye on who's in your channel, and you can do that by pressing the Users in Chat button, which is up on the top right hand corner of your chat column. It looks like two people standing next to each other, a big one and a small one, or two pegs, one of the old traditional wooden pegs. And it pops out a list of who the broadcaster is, that's yourself, who your moderators are, which can include the chat bots that are have moderating privileges, and also who else is in your current channel. Have a look at those, copy the name from there and put them into twitchinsights.net/bots. Go to that page, and then in the search box put in the name that you have copied, and if it shows up as being in, there's a section down there that says, as soon as you paste it into there, it'll say Twitch username, and it'll show you the name you put in, and then it'll say currently in X amount of live channels. The one I'm looking at the moment is in 4,456 channels. Is that a person? I don't think so. Why do I need to know this? Because there are two very specific things that can happen with bots that are in your channel. One is they can be stealing people's information. Yes, they can. They are written to do that, some of the bots. The other thing is they can also be stealing from your users in channel. When somebody, and I'll explain it, when somebody gifts a sub to one of your other users in channel, these bots are just as eligible to receive the gifted subs as your real people, your own community, the people who support you. And so somebody has saved up some money and decided that they appreciate what you're doing enough to actually put money towards it, to share the experience with other people who are there who don't necessarily have a subscription themselves, or to top up their subscription. These bots are taking that away from your people. Somebody has saved that money. Effectively, that has been stolen, because it's not going to, I mean, you might get the value of your subscription fee out of it, but your users don't. Your people who would support you don't, because it's gone to a bot. I don't really think that's fair. But so what you do is you then put a / in your chat, You don't even have to actually do any fancy things. / and then type in ban, B-A-N, space, and then paste in that name that you have just checked on Twitch Insights. And they will be banned from your chat, which means that they can no longer receive any gifted subs. They also can't be stealing that information. There you go. So there's your little bit of learning things. Now, those who have been here before have heard me say variations on this before. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with learning a little bit again repeatedly. I will not be testing you on this, but it's a good thing to do, just to look after your own community. Another aspect of looking after your community, and this is information for, especially for new visitors to my channel, who hopefully won't stay visitors, they'll actually become part of the community. Looking after your channel, you are looking after the well-being of the people who come to spend time with you, to watch you playing games if you play games, to listen to you reading if you read like I do. And so because of that, I have a bunch of auto mod rules that happen. So if you use certain sort of language, if you use language in a certain way, those messages won't get through on chat. And it's not that it's a challenge for you to try and find a way around it. It's because I would like my space to be safe for, no, not my space, but my space to be safe for grannies and their grandkids to come here and discover that, yes, you can be on the internet and still be in a good place. It isn't all bad stuff. It isn't all big bad wolves and all that sort of thing, or the modern equivalent of. So I think that's enough blethering about that sort of thing. Let's get on with reading the story. Today's chapter is actually slightly shorter than the previous two have been. This author seems to have been getting in the habit of writing longer and longer chapters in her books, and they've been great. We've been finding out all sorts of things, but some of the authors we've read before have lots of little chapters, and I can do a whole bunch of them, and then I chat in between and that sort of stuff. And some of them do this great big long chapter, and I'm like, how much longer is it going to be? Do I need to actually have a break and do the rest of the chapter when we come back next time, or whatever? Anyway, doesn't matter. I'll get on with it. So we are up to, I think I've covered everything. Yeah, I'm one of the Codex readers. Codex is a bunch of people who read public domain books on Twitch. So if you want to find out more about Codex, there are links for all of the Codex readers in my About page. Look for the header that says Codex, and it looks like that logo that's over there on my right-hand side, the right-hand side of my screen, except different background, different colours. Actually, no, it will be those colours, but different background. But also, I will give you the Codex Discord server, because you can join that and find out about the book club that we have once a month, which is in not remission. We're having a holiday from it at the moment, just because it's coming up to public holidays over in the States. Well, it is public holidays in the States, and all that sort of stuff. Out of school term. But find out more about it, and find out, that's also where you can find out more about the different readers who read as part of Codex. I'm the only one, as far as I know, who just reads children's stories. So we shall get on with reading today's children's story, which is part of The House of Arden by Edith Nesbit. Chapter 3, In Boney's Times. Do you know who Boney is? You're about to find out. Edred crept back to his stool and took his corner of the marble-backed book of Dr. Watts with fingers that trembled. Now we will find out why. I'm just going to flip back to the previous chapter. Edred, said the old lady, hand me the paper. She pointed at the sheet on the brightly polished table. He got up and carried it across to her, and as he did so he glanced at it and saw the Times, June 16, 1807. So this is 100 years before these children, before their own time. And then he knew, as well as Elfrida did, exactly where he was and when. So they are in the house, which is now theirs, which is similar to this sort of thing, but much bigger, but not in their own time zone. No, not even time zone. They are not in their own time period. They're 100 years previous. So Edred crept back to his stool and took his corner of the marble-backed book, so they're each holding a half because they're having to read it together and learn. the marble-backed book of Dr. Watts with fingers that trembled. If you are inclined to despise him, consider that it was his first real adventure. Even in ordinary life and in the time he naturally lived in, nothing particularly thrilling had ever happened to him. That's the way she wrote it. Nothing had ever happened to happen to him until he became Lord Arden and explored Arden Castle. And now he and Elfrida had not only discovered a disused house and a wonderful garret with chests in it, but had been clothed by mysterious pigeon noises in clothes belonging to another age. And if you really don't know what we're talking about in that, you need to listen to the previous chapter. I'm just going to find you the dictionary definition of garret. It's basically an attic, a room or unfinished part of a house just under the roof. There you go. A garret is a habitable attic, often used as storage, but actually developed enough to actually be used as livable rooms. At the top of a house or a larger residential building, traditionally small, dismal and cramped with sloping ceilings. In the days before elevators, this was the least prestigious position in a building, at the very top of the stairs. So often when you're reading books that are written in the Victorian period or even before that, they will talk about so-and-so living in the garret. That means basically the overlooked person who's been pushed aside. They've been given the worst room in the house. It's up on the roof. Often the roof is not well sealed, as we heard in the description previously. Sarah Crewe? In the book, A Little Princess, I think it's Sarah Crewe is the main character in that one. She goes from being one of the ones who's highly honoured because her father was spending a lot of money on her at this private girls' school, to actually, when her father had died and the money had gone and all this sort of thing, to having to serve all the other girls and living in the garret. It was an abandoned servant's room that she was living in up on the roof. And it was effectively the head of the school was punishing her for her father's death and loss of the money. It wasn't her fault, but that's just the way it was. Anyway, we will carry on. Yes. Right, so in the garret, he and Elfrida had not only discovered a disused house and a wonderful garret with chests in it. It had chests lined up at the bottom of each, down along the wall on each side of the room, under the shape of the roof, but had been clothed by mysterious pigeon noises in clothes belonging to another age. But you will say, pigeon noises can't clothe you in anything, whatever it belongs to. Well, that was just what Edred told himself at the time. Yes, he did. And yet it was certain that they did get clothed by it. This sort of thing it was that made the whole business so mysterious. Further, he and his sister had managed somehow to go back 100 years. He knew this quite well, though he had no evidence but that one sheet of newspaper. He felt it, as they say, in his bones. I don't know how it was. Perhaps the air felt 100 years younger. Shepherds and country people can tell the hour of the night by the feel of the air. So perhaps very sensitive people can tell the century by much the same means. These, of course, would be the people to whom adventures in times past or present would be likely to happen. That's an interesting thought. We must always consider what is likely, especially when we are reading stories about unusual things. Excuse me. I say, Edred whispered presently, we've got back to 1807. That paper says so. I know, Elfrida whispered. So she must have had more of that like shepherds telling the time of night feeling than even her brother. Well, he was the one who didn't really believe that any of it was actually happening when it was happening earlier on, and kept saying so. I think he just didn't want to believe it could happen. I wish I could remember what was happening in history in 1807, said Elfrida, but we never get past Edward Sorry, I'm having to read Roman numerals, which I can read fast in my head, but not out loud. But we never get past Edward IV, We always have to go back to the Saxons because of the new girls. So at her school, they get a new girl comes to the school, so the teacher makes them go back and work their way back through history again. No, forward through history. Saxons? Yeah, that's even earlier back. Right, anyway, so they have to start again from the beginning of whatever it is, the way that they learn it. And so they never get up to that particular time period. But we're not in history, we're at Arden, Edred said. True, because they recognise the house. It feels the same house, except that it's not old and dilapidated. This is in the other half of the house, the bit that's been abandoned, that they're talking about. We are in history. It'll be awful not even knowing who's king, said Elfrida, and then the stiff old lady looked up over very large spectacles with thick silver rims and said, "Silence." Presently she laid down the Times and got ink and paper, no envelopes, and began to write. She was finishing a letter. The large sheet was almost covered on one side. When she had covered it quite, she turned it round and began to write across it. She turned, which I've already read, she used a white goose quill pen. The inkstand was of china, with gold scrolls and cupids and wreaths of roses painted on it. On one side of the inkwell, on one side of the inkwell, on the other a thing like a china pepper pot, and in front a tray for the pens and the sealing wax to lie in. So it's a little holder that has an inkwell, this pepper pot thing, and grooves along the front nearer to her where you lie your pens down. And possibly also your pen knife, which is the knife you use for trimming the nib of your quill pen. That's why they're called pen knives. Where did I get to? And I've seen those. I know what she's talking about. A thing like a china pepper pot, and in front a tray for the pens and the sealing wax to lie in. Oops. Let me know if you want to do a jigsaw puzzle and I'll get that sorted for you. I totally forgot about that, sorry. If you're not feeling up to it, don't worry, you don't have to. I'm getting there, sorry. And in front, a tray for the pens and sealing wax to lie in, which they will explain in a minute, but it's more common at the time the book was written, and so therefore she may not. Sorry. Both children now knew their unpleasant poem by heart, so they watched the old lady, who was grandmother to the children she supposed them to be. No worries, Q. Anyone else wants to, that's fine. You can chat about, if anyone else comes into chat and is wondering about it, and they don't know what the link is, you're welcome to type that in for them, or tell them what it is or something like that. Doesn't matter. So they watched the old lady, who was grandmother to the children that she supposed them to be. When she had finished writing, she sprinkled some dust out of the pepper pot over the letter to dry the ink. There was no blotting paper to be seen. Then she folded the sheet and sealed it with a silver seal from the pen tray and wrote the address on the outside. Then, "Have you got your task?" she asked. "Here it is," said Elfrida, holding up the book. So that's sprinkling it over, that's blotting the ink so that it's not going to transfer across to the other half of the paper that she's written on and make it so it's unreadable. So she has written across the page this way, she's turned the paper and then written across the page this way. So you've got lines that go this way and you've got lines that go this way with your writing. And if you've never tried it, if you do cursive, it works better. Try it yourself and you can get a lot more words on the page. You can, especially back in the day when paper was very expensive. "No impudence, miss," said the grandmother. Oh, that's because Elfrida had said, "Here it is," and held up the book. "No impudence, miss," said the grandmother sternly. "You very well know that I mean, have you got it by rote yet? And you know, too, that you should say ma'am whenever you address me." "Yes, ma'am," said Elfrida, and this was taken to mean that she knew her task. "Then come and say it. No, you know better than that. Feet in the first position, hands behind you, head straight. Do not fidget with your feet." So then first Elfrida, she's the oldest, and then Edred recited the melancholy verses. "Now," said the old lady, "you may go and play in the garden." "Mayn't we take your letter to the post?" Elfrida asked. Yes, but you are not to stay in the George Bar, mind. Not even if Mrs. Skinner should invite you. Just hand her the letter and come out. Shut the door softly, and do not shuffle with your feet. Yes, ma'am, said Elfrida, and on that they got out. They'll find us out. Bound to, said Edred. We don't know a single thing about anything. I don't know where the George is, or where to get a stamp, or anything. We must find someone we can trust, and tell them the truth, said Elfrida. There isn't anyone, said Edred, that I'd trust. You can't trust the sort of people who stick this sort of baby flummery round a chap's neck. That was that rough thing, the tucker, they called it. He crumpled his starched frill with hot, angry fingers. Mine prickles all round too, Elfrida reminded him, and it's lower, and you get bigger as you go down, so it prickles more of me than yours does you. Let's go back to the attic and try and get back into our own time. I expect we just got into the wrong door, don't you? Let's go now. Oh, no, said Elfrida. How dreadfully dull. Why, we shall see all sorts of things and be top in history for the rest of our lives. Let's go through with it. Oh, that's a thought. We've experienced it firsthand. But will anyone believe what they tell them? They tend to prefer what they read in the books for something to believe. Do you remember which door it was? The attic, I mean, Edred suddenly asked. Was it the third on the left? I don't know, said Elfrida, but we can easily find it when we want it. I'd like to know now, said Edred obstinately. You never know when you are going to want things. Mrs. Honeysett says you ought always to be able to lay your hand on anything you want the moment you do want it. I should like to be quite certain about being able to lay our hands on our own clothes. Suppose someone goes and tidies them up. You know what people are. All right, said Elfrida. We'll go and tidy them up ourselves. It won't take a minute. It would certainly not have taken 5 if things had been as the children expected. They raced up the stairs to the corridor where the prints were, printed pictures along the walls. It's not the first door, I'm certain, said Edred. So they opened the second, but it was not that either. So then they tried all of the doors in turn, even opening at last the first one of all. And it was not that even. It was not any of them. We've come to the wrong corridor, said the boy. It's the only one, said the girl, and it was, for though they had hunted all over the house, upstairs and downstairs, and tried every door, the door of the attic they could not find again. And what is more, when they came to count up, there were 57 doors without it. 55, 56, 57, said Elfrida, and ended in a sob. The door's gone. We shall have to stay here forever and ever. Oh, I want Auntie. I do, I do. She sat down abruptly on a small green mat in front of the last door, which happened to be that of the kitchen. Edred says he did not cry too, and if the number of doors was not in that corridor that was in the house. They were meaning, which is why she happens to be in front of the kitchen now. Edred says he did not cry too, and if what he says is true, Elfrida's crying must have been louder than it was usual with her, for the kitchen door opened and the 2 children were caught up in 2 fat arms and hurried into a pleasant kitchen, where bright brass and copper pots hung on the walls, and between a large fire and a large meat screen, a leg of mutton turned round and round, with nobody to help it. Hold your noise, said the owner of the fat arms, who now proved to be a very stout woman in a chocolate-coloured print gown, sprigged with blue roses. Sprigged means spotted across it. This pattern was, not a continuous pattern, but bits of it. Got the idea now? Right. She had a large linen apron and a cap with flappy frills, and between the frills just such another good, kind, jolly face as Mrs. Honeysett's. I wonder if she's related. She might be. Here, stop your mouths, she said, or your granny'll be after you, to say nothing of Boney. Stop your crying, do, and see what cookie's got for you. She opened a tin canister and picked out 2 lumps of brown stuff that looked like sand. about the size and shape of prunes they were. "What's that?" said Edred. "Drabbit me," said the cook. "What a child it is, not know sugar when he sees it. Well, well, Master Edred, what next, I should like to know?" The children took the lumps and sucked them. They were of sugar, sure enough, but the sugar had a strong, coarse taste behind its sweetness, and if the children had really not been quite extra polite and kind, they would have followed the promptings of nature but of course they knew that this would be both disgusting and ungrateful, so they didn't spit it out, is what she's implying, but she hasn't said. So they got the sugar down somehow, while the cook beamed at them with a wide, kind smile between her cap frills and 2 hands as big as little beefsteak puddings on her hips. "Now, no more crybabying," she said. "Run along and play." "We've got to take Granny's letter to post," said Edred, "and we don't—" "Cook," said Elfrida on a sudden impulse, "can you keep a secret?" "Can't I?" said the cook. "Haven't I kept the secret of how frumenty's made, and Bakewell pies and all?" So frumenty, do you know what that is? Is that another word we need to write down? I didn't look up Mangelwurzel last time, did you? I'm going to write down this word. Frumenty. Frumenty. And what was the other one? Secrets. Bakewell pies. I have heard of them. Actually, I've heard both those words before. Bakewell pies. I think they are originally from, Bakewell pies are originally from a town called Bakewell. Surprise, surprise. Anyway, we shall carry on. We are still reading. And if anyone wants to, they can look up both frumenty and Bakewell pies, and then just either type into the chat box the definition, or copy a little piece of the definition and paste it in there. Just remember, don't make the sentence too long, otherwise it'll get banned. Well, it won't post. Right. "Can't I?" said the cook. "Haven't I kept the secret of how frumenty's made?" Fermenty, she says, but it's actually frumenty, I think. Fermenty. "Made, and Bakewell pies and all. There's no fermenty to hold a candle to mine in this country, as well you know." "We don't know anything," said Elfrida. "That's just it, and we daren't let Granny know how much we don't know. Something's happened to us so that we can't remember anything that happened more than an hour ago." That's a good way to explain it. "Bless me," said the cook. "Don't you remember old Cookie giving you baked apple dumplings when you were sent to bed without your suppers a week come Thursday?" "No," said Elfrida, "but I'm sure you did. Only what are we to do?" "You are not deceiving poor Cookie, are you now? Like you did about the French soldiers being hid in the windmill, upsetting all the village like you did." "No, it's true. It's dreadfully true. You'll have to help us. We don't remember anything, either of us." The cook sat down heavily in a polished armchair with a patchwork cushion. "She's overlooked you. There's no doubt about it. You're bewitched. Oh, my pretty little dears, that ever I should see the day." The cook's fat, jolly face twisted and puckered in a way which each child was familiar with in the face of the other. "Don't cry," they said both together, and Elfrida added, "Who's overlooked what?" "Oh, Betty Lovell has. That I'll be bound. She's bewitched you both, sure as eggs is eggs. I knew there'd be some sort of a to-do when my lord had her put in the stocks for stealing sticks in the wood. We've got to get her to take it off, my dears. That's what we got to do for sure. Without you could find a white mouldy-warp, and that's not likely." "A white mouldy-warp?" said both the children, and again they spoke together like a chorus and looked at each other like conspirators. "You know the rhyme. Oh, but if you've forgotten everything, you've forgotten that too." "Say it, won't you?" said Edred. "Let's see. How'd it go? White mouldy-warp a spell can make, white mouldy-warp a spell can break. When all be well, let mouldy-warp be. When all goes ill, then turn to he." Except that to call the mouldy-warp they needed to make up their own poem. but it does help them to understand what Mouldiwarp can do. Well, all's not gone ill yet, said Elfrida, wriggling her neck in its prickly muslin tucker. Let's go and see the witch. You best take her something, a screw of sugar she'd like and a pinch of tea. A screw is where you take some paper, you put whatever it is in it, then you bring the top of it up and twist it together. That's called a screw of whatever the item is. It used to be a common way of packaging things, small quantities of things. Very useful, especially if you've got something like paper lunch wrap, greaseproof paper or something like that. You best take her something, a screw of sugar she'd like, and a pinch of tea. Why, she'd not say thank you for it, said Edred, looking at the tiny packets. They were small. I expect you've forgotten, said the cook gently, that tea's 10 shillings a pound, and sugar's gone up to 3 and 6 since the war. My goodness, that's a hang of a lot, considering how long ago this was. This is 200 years ago for us. More than 200 years ago. What war? The French War. You haven't forgotten we're at war with Boney and the French. And the bonfire we had up the church when the news came of the drubbing we gave 'em at Trafalgar, and poor dear Lord Nelson and all, and your grandfather reading out about it to them from the George balcony, and all the people waiting to cheer and him not able to get it out for choking pride and because of Lord Nelson, God bless him, and the people couldn't get their cheers out neither for the same cause, and everyone blowing their noses and shaking each other's hands like as if it was a mad funeral. How splendid, said Elfrida, but we don't remember it. Nor you don't remember how you killed all the white butterflies last year because you said they were Frenchies in their white coats, and the birching you got for cruelty to dumb animals. Birching is like a caning, but with a thin birch stick. For cruelty to dumb animals, his lordship said. You howled for an hour together after it, so you did. I'm glad we've forgotten that somehow, said Edred. Gracious, said the cook, half after 11 and my eggs not so much as broke for my pudding. Off you go with your letter. Don't you tell anyone else about your forgetting. And then you come home along by Deering Spinney and go see old Betty. Speak pretty to her and give her the tea and sugar, and keep your feet crossed under your chair if she asks you to sit down. And I'll give you an old knife blade apiece to put in your pockets. She can't do nothing if you got the steel on you. That was a thought that was in Rudyard Kipling's Puck of Pook's Hill, that steel meant that the fairy folk couldn't do dangerous things, couldn't perform magic to or at or about you. I'm not sure. It's something to do with an English tradition. I don't quite understand it. Anyway, and she can't do nothing if you got steel on you, and you get her to take it off. The ill-wishing, I mean. And don't you let her know you've got steel. They don't like to think you've been beforehand with them. So the children went down across the fields to the George, and the bean flowers smelt as sweet, and the skylarks sang as sweetly, as clearly, and the sun and the sky were just as golden and blue as they had been last week, when they had been up on the downs, and all this adventure had started before they'd been at the castle. And last week was really 100 years on in the future, and yet it was last week too from where they were. Time is a very confusing thing, as the children remarked to each other more than once. They found the George halfway up Arden village, a stately great house shaped like an E, with many windows and a great porch with a balcony over it. They gave their letter to a lady in a round cap, who sat sewing in a pleasant room where there were many bottles and kegs, and rows of bright pewter ale pots, and little fat mugs to measure other things with, and pewter plates on a brown dresser. There were greyhounds too, all sprawling, legs and shoulders and tails entangled together like a bunch of dead eels, before the widest hearth the children had ever seen. They hurried away the moment they had given the letter. A coach, top-heavy with luggage, had drawn up in front of the porch, and as they went out they saw the ostlers leading away the 6 smoking horses. So the horses had been driven hard, and they were now steaming from their exertions and sweating. And the horses, trying to find where I got to. Ostlers leading away the 6 smoking horses. Edred felt he must see the stables, so they followed, and the stables were as big as the house, and there were horses going in and horses going out, and hay and straw, and ostlers with buckets and ostlers with harnesses, and stalls and loose boxes beyond counting, and bustle and hurry beyond words. Do you know what an ostler is? I shall give you that piece of information. Nope. An ostler comes from hostler, is a groom or stableman who's employed in a stable to take care of horses, usually at an inn. In the 20th century, the word came to be used in the railroad industry for a type of train driver. So there you go. An ostler is the stable person, the groom, who takes care of the horses, especially in an inn where they actually change the horses when the coach comes through, especially if it's something like a mail coach or one of the other ones that is doing a regular run like we would have a bus or a train doing now. The coach comes in, the horses are changed for a fresh sort of horses, and while that's happening, the people on board will possibly go into the inn, refresh themselves, go to the loo, all that sort of stuff. Sorry, itchy nose. And then with the fresh horses, they will drive on to the next staging post or the next inn that they're meant to be stopping at. Because the horses can't keep running at that speed for really long times, and you want the horses to be able to keep doing this as a job. So they run for a while, they stop, they get changed out, they have a rest until it's time for them to start running again, pulling a different carriage or coach or whatever. Right, so it's an ostler's job to look after those horses, especially to come out to hold on to the horses when the coach pulls up, so that the horses don't start walking off or running off or anything when the people are getting out of the coach. And that, for most people, that's their experience of the ostlers. And then they take them and swap them around and make sure that they're healthy and fed and stuff. Right, carrying on. Ostlers with buckets and ostlers with harnesses and stalls and loose boxes beyond counting. That's where you put the horses, where they're feeding and stuff like that. And bustle and hurry beyond words. However many horses have you got? Asked Elfrida, addressing a man who had not joined in the kindly chorus of "Hello, little ones!" that greeted the children, so she judged him to be a newcomer, as he was. 52, said the man. What for? Said Elfrida. Why, for the coaches and the post-chaise and the king's messengers, for sure, the man answered. How else would us all get about the country and get to hear the newses if it weren't for the stable of that the George keeps? So because they keep a good stable of horses that can be swapped out, the coaches come here to swap their horses out to carry on. So therefore they get all this extra news that some other places don't. And then the children remembered that this was the time before railways and telegrams and telephones even. It is always difficult to remember exactly where one is when one happens to get into a century that is not one's own. Edred would have liked to stay all day watching the busyness of everyone and the beautifulness of the horses, but Elfrida dragged him away. They had to find the witch, she reminded him, and in a dreadful tumble-down cottage with big holes in its roof of rotten thatch, they did find her. She was exactly like the pictures of witches in storybooks, only she had not a broomstick or a high-pointed hat. She had instead a dirty cap that had once been white, and a rusty gown that had once been black, and a streaky shawl that might once perhaps have been scarlet, but nobody could be sure of that now. There was a black cat sitting on a very dirty wooden settle, that's like a hard sofa seat, and the old woman herself sat on a rickety three-legged stool, her wrinkled face bent over a speckled hen which she was nursing in her lap and holding gently in her yellow, wrinkled hands. As soon as Edred caught sight of her through the crooked doorway, he stopped. I'm not going in, he said. What's the good? We know jolly well she hasn't bewitched us, and if we go cheeking her, she may, and then we shall be in a nice hole. There's the tea and sugar, said Elfrida. You just give it to her and come away. I'll wait for you by the stile. So Elfrida went into the cottage alone and said good morning in a rather frightened way. Sorry, I'm taking my socks off. Getting too hot again. My feet get too hot very easily. Sorry. I do say sorry a lot, don't I? I just realised it again. Carrying on. So Elfrida went into the cottage alone and said good morning in a rather frightened way. I've brought you some tea and sugar, she said, and stood waiting for the thank you, without which it would not be polite to say good morning and go away. The thank you never came. Instead, the witch stopped stroking the hen and said, What for? I've not done you no harm. No, said Elfrida, I'm sure you wouldn't. Then what have you brought it for? Oh, just for you, said Elfrida. I thought you'd like it. It's just a love gift, you know. This was Aunt Edith's way of calling a present that didn't come just because it was your birthday or Christmas or you had had a tooth out, because that's from their own time period. A love gift, said the old woman slowly, after all this long time. And that's where our picture comes from, and I shall find where it is to show it to you. There you go. And I'm leaning forward to see over the top of my book on its book stand. Sorry. That's just where it is. So here's this old woman with her dirty old clothes. She's got the chicken on her lap, and here's Elfrida giving her the 2 little paper parcels which have the tea and sugar in. I wonder if I can actually make it big enough for you to see the parcels. There they are, except that that's not quite, they may have been tied up with string afterwards. But normally when you talk about a twist of something, it's you put the paper down, you put the thing on it, you bunch it up, and then you twist it above where the item is. But then it's probably wrapped up in brown paper and tied with string to stop it being anything else. I shall put this back where it belongs and carry on. Just need to pass on some information to somebody in the house, which I can do without going anywhere. So just bear with me a moment while I type something in. I will mute my keyboard just because my keyboard is very... I'm going to mute my microphone, and you can just twiddle your thumbs and look at the picture of the Done. Wonderful. Thank you for telling me. I should have noticed that the sound bar wasn't doing anything, but I didn't. So the caption on that was, I've brought you some tea and sugar. And then I was saying that, yes, the old lady would have been a little bit wondering about why, because obviously she's got this reputation of being a witch, and so therefore the only way people give her something is because they're trying to effectively bribe her to take a spell or anything like that off them, and she's just used to being badly treated all the time. She's probably not quite as evil as people seem to deem her to be. It's just she doesn't fit what they would like her to be like, ordinary people to be like. Anyway. Make sure you're drinking enough. And I'm going to have a little bit of my coffee while I remember, while I've still got it. Of course I've still got it. I haven't drunk it yet. I have a little bit of my coffee while I still have time in the day to have it. I don't drink coffee too late in the day. Carrying on. Right. Elfrida did not understand. How should she? It's almost impossible for even the most grown-up and clever of us to know how women used to be treated. And not so very long ago either. If they were once suspected of being witches, it generally began by the old woman's being cleverer than her neighbours. Just cleverer. Nothing else. Just cleverer. Sorry, I'm just looking at a notification that my computer's giving me. Not for this, but for something else. It's a little distracting. I would like to ignore it, but I just need to stay aware. Right. It generally began by the old woman's being cleverer than her neighbours, having more wit to find out what was the matter with sick people, and more still to cure them. Probably from observation of things that worked and things that didn't work. Then her extra cleverness would help her to foretell storms and gales and frosts, and to find water by the divining rod, a very mysterious business. And when once you can find out where water is just by carrying a forked hazel twig between your hands and walking across a meadow, you can most likely find out a good many other things that your stupid neighbours would never dream of. And in those long ago days, which really aren't so very long ago, you being so much cleverer than your neighbours would be quite enough. You would soon be known as the wise woman. And from wise woman to witch, it was a very short step indeed. So Elfrida, not understanding, said, "Yes, is your fowl ill?" "'Twill mend," said the old woman. "'Twill mend. The healing of my hands has gone into it." She rose and set the hen on the hearth, where it fluttered and squawked and settled among the grey ashes, very much annoying the black cat, and laid her hands suddenly on Elfrida's shoulders. "And now the healing of my hands is for you," she said. "You have brought me a love gift. Never a gift have I had these 50 year, but was gift of fear or a payment for help, to buy me to take off a spell or to put a spell on. But you have brought me a love gift, and I tell you, you shall have your heart's desire. You shall have love around and about you all your life long. That which is lost shall be found. That which came not shall come again. In this world's goods you shall be blessed, and blessed in the goods of the heart also. I know, I see, and for you I see everything good and fair. Your future shall be clean and sweet as your kind heart." That's a nice little thing to say. And I think a lot of that comes from, if you approach people with a positive and generous manner, unlike what others approach that person, then yes, you probably are different in yourself enough that it's going to make a difference to how they handle things, how the world approaches you. So I can see why those things would happen. She took her hands away. Elfrida, very much impressed by these flattering remarks, which she felt she did not deserve, stood still, not knowing what to say or do. She rather wanted to cry. "I only brought it because Cook told me," she said. "Cook didn't give you the kind heart which makes you want to cry for me now," said the witch. "That's true." The old woman sank down in a crouching heap, and her voice changed to one of sing-song. "I know," she said, "I know many things. All alone the livelong day and the death-long night, I have learned to see, as cats see through the dark, I see through the days that have been and shall be. I know that you are not here, that you are not now. You will return whence you came, and this time that is not yours shall bear no trace of you, and my blessing shall be with you in your own time and your own place, because you brought a love gift to the poor old wise woman of Arden. Is there anything I can do for you? Elfrida asked, very sorry indeed, for the old woman's voice was very pitiful. Kiss me, said the old woman, kiss me with your little child's mouth that has come back 100 years to do it. Now that's the bit that's magical, that she knows this. Elfrida did not wish to kiss the wrinkled grey face, but her heart wished her to be kind, and she obeyed her heart. Ah, said the wise woman, now I see. Oh, never have I had such a vision. None of them all has ever been like this. I see great globes of light, like the sun in the streets of the city, where now are only little oil lamps and guttering lanterns. I see iron roads with fiery dragons drawing the coaches, and rich and poor riding up and down on 'em. Men shall speak in England, and their voice be heard in France. More, the voices of dead men shall be kept alive in boxes and speak at the will of those who still live. The handlooms shall cease in the cottages, and the weavers shall work in palaces with 1,000 windows lighted as bright as day. The sun shall stoop to make men's portraits more like than any painter can make them. There shall be ships that shall run under the seas like conger eels, and ships that shall ride over the clouds like great birds, and bread that is now 1.09 shall be 5 pence, and the corn and the beef shall come from overseas to feed us, and every child shall be taught who can learn, and— "Peace, prater," cried a stern voice in the doorway. Elfrida turned. There stood the grandfather, Lord Arden, very straight and tall and grey, leaning on his gold-headed cane, and beside him Edred, looking very small and found out. Sorry, I really need to just deal with something. I'm going to turn off my mic again for a moment. And I'll just give you the be right back, and then you don't have to worry about looking at me. just sorted that out. No, kind of passed on the information to somebody else in the house who can do a bit of a tech investigation until I'm finished. And we're nearly finished the chapter in today's reading, by the way. So I'll complete it and then we'll say goodbye. Right. Peace, praetor, cried a stern voice in the doorway. Elfrida turned. There stood the grandfather, Lord Arden, very straight and tall and grey, leaning on his gold-headed cane, and beside him Edred, looking very small and found out. The old witch did not seem to see them. Her eyes that rolled and blinked saw nothing. But she must have heard, so I'm thinking she must be blind. She must have heard, for "Loss to Arden," she said, "loss and woe to Arden. The hangings of your house shall be given to the spider, and the mice shall eat your carved furnishings. Your gold shall be less and less, and your house go down and down, till there is not a field that is yours about your house." Lord Arden shrugged his shoulders. "Likely tales," he said, "to frighten babes with. Tell me rather, if you would have me believe, what shall hap tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," said the wise woman, "the French shall land in Limechurch Bay," or Limechurch Bay. Limechurch is actually a place that we've come across before, I think. Anyway. Lord Arden laughed. "And I give you a sign, 3 signs," said the woman faintly, for it is tiring work seeing into the future, even when you are enlightened with a kiss from someone who has been there. "You shall see the white mouldy warp that is the badge of Arden on your threshold as you enter." "That shall be one sign," said the old man mockingly. "And the second," she said, "shall be again the badge of your house and your own chair in your own parlour." "That seems likely," said Lord Arden, sneering. "And the third," said she, "shall be the badge of your house in the arms of this child." She turned her back and picked the hen out of the ashes. Lord Arden led Edred and Elfrida away, one in each hand, and as he went he was very severe on disobedient children who went straying after wicked witches, and that they could not defend themselves without blaming the cook, which, of course, they would not do. "Bread and water for dinner," he said, "to teach you better ways." "Oh, grandfather," said Elfrida, catching at his hand, "don't be so unkind. Just think about when you were little. I'm sure you liked looking at witches, didn't you now?" Lord Arden stared angrily at her, and then he chuckled. "It's a bold girl, so it is," he said. "I own I remember well seeing a witch ducked no further off than Newchurch, and playing truant from my tutor to see it too. They used to drown them. If she was a witch, she would have survived, and they would then kill her. If she drowned, then she wasn't a witch. You didn't have much chance, really, did you?" "There now, you see," said Elfrida coaxingly. "We didn't mean to be naughty. We were just like what you were. You won't make it bread and water, will you? Especially if bread's so dear." Lord Arden chuckled again. "Why, the little white mouse has found a tongue. And never was I spoken to so bold since the days I wore petticoats myself," said he. "Well, well, we'll say no more about it this time." And Edred, who had privately considered that Elfrida was behaving like an utter idiot, thought better of it. Petticoats, yes, little boys used to wear a different style of clothing. So they turned across the summer fields to Arden Castle. There seemed to be more of the castle than when the children had first seen it, and it was tidier, much, and on the doorstep sat a white mole. "There now," said Elfrida. The mole vanished like a streak of white paint that is rubbed out. "Pah!" said Lord Arden. "There's plenty of white moles in the world." Actually, I don't know that there are. I can't say I've seen a lot of them. Have you? I'm just going to find the next picture here, which I'm pretty sure is going to be that one. No. Sorry, hit the wrong button. It's all right. But when he saw the white mole sitting, there he is. And that's the ruff, the tucker. Does this outfit remind you of anything? The traditional illustration of Tweedledum and Tweedledee was this style of clothing that Edred's wearing. Okay, so there's the little mole there. I'm going to read you this bit and it'll make sense. When he saw the white mole sitting up in his own carved armchair in the parlour, he owned that it was very unusual. Elfrida stooped and held out her arms. She was extremely glad to see the mole, because ever since she and her brother had come into this strange time, she had felt that it would be the greatest possible comfort to have the mole at hand. The mole, who understood everything, to keep and advise, and above all, to get them safely back into the century they belonged to. And the Mouldiwarp made a little run and a little jump, and Elfrida caught it and held it against her waist with both her hands. "Stay with me," whispered Elfrida to the mole. "By George," said Lord Arden to the universe. "So now you see," said Edred to Lord Arden. "Your emblem on the doorstep, in your own chair, and in the arms of this child." There's the mole jumping across into her hands. And that's the end of the chapter. The next chapter is the landing of the French, and we don't have enough time for it today. And that one's going to be slightly shorter again, so it will depend on how long the following chapter is as to whether we get to read that one too. But it's been lovely having you here, and I do hope that Q, you get better soon. You start to feel better, you start to feel a little bit more yourself, regain a little bit of a sense of smell and be able to enjoy food, because being able to enjoy food actually helps you to make sure that you do eat enough. But make sure you keep having plenty of liquids. Chicken soup is really good because it's got lots of nourishment in it, as well as having all the extra liquid. Not creamy, but like the broth style. That usually helps. In fact, when I'm not feeling so good, one of my favourites is chicken noodle soup. I like the texture, and I like the fact that it's a thin soup, not a really thick, gluggy thing, but it's pleasant. It's got a little bit of saltiness, which helps when you don't have a very good sense of smell or taste at the time, such as when you have a bad cold. And obviously you're not going to be able to enjoy the flavour while you've got COVID if you've lost your sense of smell at the moment. Yes, he's doing well so far, and thank you for that. The good wishes, I'll let him know that he's being thought of. Right, so there you go. We've got the next little bit. The children have time travel. They've gone back in time too, and it's because of the clothes they put on. You did pick that up, didn't you? Or the clothes that were put on them. I think it's because they put the hats on that the dove voices, the pigeon voices, came in close around them and clothed them in the clothes from the same chest. I wonder if each chest has a different time period's clothes in it, and if if they're going to time travel for the rest of the book. We'll find out, won't we? Don't forget, this all started because they're trying to find the treasure that apparently was from this family line. We'll find out what happens eventually, I'm sure, but there'll be a lot of adventures along the way, just because that's the way Miss Nesbit writes her stories. But lots of fun anyway. So, all the best. Much love to you all. Look after yourselves. Get other people around you to help with looking after you if you need it. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the community. And I look forward to seeing you next time. And in the meantime, happy reading.